The ACLU, or the American Civil Liberties Union, they're just an absolutely horrible organization. Now, I'm not sure that many people that are listening to the podcast this week would disagree with what I'm saying, but their latest push is just absolutely insane. Yes, they've pushed for things like impeaching President Trump. They've pushed for rights for special interest groups, but I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about the ACLU's new fight to put tampons in a men's bathroom. I'm your host, Jared Dyson, and this is the Closet Conservative Podcast. A lot of people are probably surprised that I'm not talking about President Trump and impeachment this week. Obviously, President Trump was impeached by the House, and I feel like we've covered that topic. We've covered it on the podcast. We've written about it over on the website. We knew the House was going to impeach him. We knew the Senate is going to acquit him as soon as they get the articles of impeachment, if they ever get to start their investigation and get those articles of impeachment. So we may have more to talk about that later, but I really want to get into this new ACLU statement that was released earlier this week. If you would have asked me when I started the podcast several months ago if I would ever have to do a podcast episode on tampons, I would have laughed at you. I would have never thought we would be having a discussion about tampons on this podcast, but here we are. Earlier this week, the ACLU issued a statement calling for tampons to be available in the men's restroom. The group argued that tampons or other feminine hygiene products are not routinely offered in a men's restroom. They argued that there are not normally places in a men's restroom to dispose of these products, and they said it was a form of sex discrimination. I know that I'm not the smartest person in the world, but why would a man have any need for feminine hygiene products? I mean, it makes absolutely no sense to me. I have been a man in my entire life. Not one single time have I ever had a need for a feminine hygiene product in a men's restroom. Think about it. I've been to the restroom thousands of times in my life. I have probably been in over 1,000 different restrooms, over 30 states, and in several countries. Never once have I ever needed a tampon or a feminine hygiene product in a men's restroom. Never once have I even heard anyone in a men's restroom ask for a feminine hygiene product. Why? Because men do not need them. If you were born as a man, it's physically impossible for you to be a female. I don't care how much surgery you have, how many hormones you take, you are a biological male. But the ACLU argues that it is not a full or accurate portrayal to say that women are the only ones who menstruate, get pregnant, or breastfeed. I'm sorry, but yeah, it is. To say otherwise is absurd. You may argue and say, but Jared, how can you be so certain? Well, I am so glad you asked. I want to really be able to help you understand this situation. For menstruation to occur, it means that you must produce an egg as part of the biological process in your body. You know, I performed a quick internet search for proof of this. If you search what gender produces an egg, guess what comes up? A female. Yes, it requires you to be a female to menstruate. It requires female anatomy to become pregnant. It requires female anatomy to breastfeed and produce milk for a child. Yes, you must be a female to do all of those things. All of their arguments that they've said regarding these things and having them in the men's restroom, they're actually asinine arguments because you simply have no need for those things if you're a male. You don't have to have this happen. But the argument is that they want this stuff available for the transgender females. They want it available for those people who want to say they are men that are really females. The argument's misleading because you simply cannot need those items if you're a male. How can a trans male and a non-binary person experience pregnancy and menstruation? It's easy. Because they're females. You can argue for menstrual equity all you want. In the end, the only equity that you're arguing for is for only females. A female has the option for menstrual equity. It's called going to the female restroom where those products are and are usually distributed. The ACLU makes the argument for ease of access to feminine hygiene products in a men's restroom. It talks about having these products available in men's jail facilities, even in men's homeless or violence shelters. Why would we provide these products in those locations? I mean, these aren't locations that women would typically reside. These are locations for men, not for women. The argument comes as a result of the ACLU's arguments on the so-called tampon tax. Now, this is not a real tax that's out there. It's not a real tax that was passed by Congress. It's a tax that's applied to women's hygiene products. It's called sales tax. The argument is that feminine hygiene products should be exempt from sales tax. They say it's wrong to charge sales tax to females on something that they have to purchase. They say that it makes these feminine hygiene products a luxury item. But these items are not luxury items, they are actually consumer goods. Purchasing these products is no different than purchasing toilet tissue or paper towels for your home. Anyone that listens to this podcast would probably agree you wouldn't want to think about your restroom in your house without toilet tissue. I mean, obviously it's not mandatory that you have toilet tissue in your life to just to be able to live, but it certainly provides a level of hygiene that we've all become accustomed to and we appreciate. The same goes for paper towels. I mean, obviously you can choose to leave a mess on the counter or the floor of your home without cleaning up, but it certainly is nice to have the convenience of that paper towel if you need to clean an area without having to go get a towel out of the cabinet that you may have to wash in the laundry. If we're going to start arguing about these types of items being exempt from sales tax, why don't we start talking about other forms of discrimination from sales tax? For example, I could argue that I'm being discriminated against if I have to get in my car and drive to an office. Some people have the ability to work from home. Others may simply choose not to work. Why should I be discriminated against by having to pay a fuel tax every time I stop to fill up my car? Or maybe I should argue that eating food is a necessity to life. Mandating that I pay sales tax on food purchases, or when I go to sit down at a restaurant and order a meal, that's taking advantage of me for having to feed myself. It's a basic necessity of life and eating. Does that make it okay for me to say they are discriminating against me? I mean, these arguments are truly as absurd as they sound. For me to argue that I'm being discriminated against because I made a choice, it's ridiculous. I can choose not to work, or I can choose not to eat. It's a choice I make every day. These are examples of the arguments that these people are making. You know, these people were born as females. No one forced them to choose to become a male or identify as a male. In fact, these people are still females. Science doesn't say just because you have a surgery or you take hormones, you can become a male. You're still a female. You're born a female. You have female anatomy. You're still a female. Even if you decide to change your anatomy physically, you are still a female. You simply do not choose your gender and change your gender because you feel a certain way. There are two genders, male and female. I've talked about it in the past. Scripture teaches that from the beginning of time, this is how it's happened. God never designed the human body to be a select what you want option. I've never been to a hospital and seen a form where you can just pick it up and decide, do you want a male or female child? When they're born, they're either male or female. There's no choice. No one is born gender neutral or non-binary. These are choices that are made. This argument of discrimination is absolutely absurd. This is not discrimination. It's called consequence. Every choice you make in life has a consequence that you have to live with. For example, if I choose not to eat, I may have to live with the consequence of being hungry or malnourished. If I choose not to go to work, I may have to live with the consequence of losing my job. The ACLU is attempting to remove any consequence of decisions that are made for these transgenders or non-binaries. It's just more of the left's rhetoric in an attempt to make it where there are no consequences to anything. The idea of the left is that you can simply do what you want, and everyone should accept that. No one should disagree or disapprove of you. They simply must agree, appreciate what you're doing, and move on. Unfortunately, that's just not how the real world works. If, as a woman, you decide that you want to identify as a man and use the men's restroom, I am 100% in agreement that that is your decision. But with that decision comes the fact that you have to live with the consequence of that decision, whether it is good or bad. Maybe it gives you some form of notoriety because it causes your friends and family to accept you more, or just maybe it leaves you sitting in the middle of a men's restroom looking for a tampon.
This is the Closet Conservative Podcast. All material copyright The Closet Conservative. Music courtesy of Greg Shields Music. Remember to subscribe to our podcast to receive all the latest episodes. We can also be found online at closetconservative.net or on Facebook and Twitter.